June 15, 1944. The tropical air on Saipan hung heavy with the acrid scent of cordite and salted ocean spray. The distant thunder of naval guns echoing across the jagged coral reefs like the heartbeat of an unrelenting storm. In the dim light of dawn, amid the smoldering ruins of a palm-fringed beachhead, a young Japanese soldier named Hiroshi Tanaka stumbled forward, his hands raised in surrender. The metallic tumps of blood on his lips and the relentless hum of American aircraft overhead piercing the chaos like an inescapable omen. This fleeting moment of capitulation on the blood-soaked sands of Saipan marked not just the end of one man's fight, but a pivotal fracture in the grand architecture of the Pacific War. Saipan, a verdant speck in the Mariana Islands chain, spanned merely 12 miles long and 5 miles wide. Yet its strategic value towered like the island's own Mount Tapicho, positioned 1,200 miles from Tokyo. Its capture by American forces would transform it into a launching pad for B-29 Superfortress bombers. It's capable of raining destruction upon Japan's industrial heartland for the first time in the conflict. The invasion, codenamed Operation Forager, commenced with over 70,000 U.S. Marines and Army troops storming ashore against an entrenched garrison of approximately 31,000 Japanese soldiers under Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Saito, supplemented by thousands of Korean laborers and local Chamorro civilians. The battle's ferocity was foretold in the pre-invasion bombardment. More than 165,000 shells from U.S. warships pulverized the island. The defenders, fortified in caves and bunkers, exacted a heavy toll with American casualties mounting. Over 3,400 killed and 10,000 wounded by war's end in the minds of these Japanese defenders. Schooled in the unyielding doctrine of Bushido and imperial propaganda, Saipan represented an inviolable bastion of the greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere. They had been indoctrinated to view the Americans as barbaric demons, weak-willed capitalists whose society teetered on the brink of collapse under the strains of war. Soldiers like Tanaka anticipated a swift victory, envisioning waves of Yankee invaders repelled by fanatical charges. Their homeland's factories churning out endless Zero fighters and Yamato-class battleships to dominate the skies and seas. The reality that unfolded was a shattering inversion. The U.S. forces, bolstered by overwhelming naval and air superiority, methodically dismantled Japanese defenses. Their Sherman tanks rumbling through sugarcane fields while P-51 Mustangs strafed retreating columns. What the soldiers expected, a heroic stand culminating in Gokusaya, or shattered jewel suicide attacks, was supplanted by the grim spectacle of mass civilian suicides. With over 22,000 Japanese and Korean non-combatants perishing, many leaping from the sheer cliffs of Marpi Point into the churning Pacific below. Driven by fears of American atrocities propagated by their own officers, amid this carnage, an unlikely figure emerged. Private First Class Guy Gabaldon, a Mexican-American, Marine fluent in Japanese from his foster family upbringing in East Los Angeles. On July 8, 1944, following a disastrous banzai charge that decimated the remaining Japanese forces, Gabaldon ventured alone into enemy-held caves, persuading over 800 soldiers and civilians to surrender with promises of humane treatment, food, water, and eventual repatriation. This act, earning him the Navy Cross, swelled the total Japanese prisoners on Saipan to around 921 military captives and thousands of civilians. A rare breach in the no-surrender ethos that saw 97% of the garrison perish. Yet, for those who laid down arms, the true revelation awaited not on the battlefield, but in the makeshift stockades and subsequent transit camps where American psychological operations began to peel away layers of indoctrination. As the captured soldiers were herded into barbed wire enclosures under the relentless equatorial sun, their emaciated frames bearing the scars of weeks in hiding rationed to meager handfuls of rice and tainted water, they braced for the tortures their propaganda films had depicted: bayonettings, floggings, and worse. Instead, medics tended their wounds with sulfa powder and bandages, while rations of canned sea rations and fresh water arrived in abundance. the portions dwarfing anything they had seen since mobilization. But it was the introduction of motion pictures, screened on portable projectors in the humid evenings of those temporary camps on Saipan and later en route to more permanent facilities in Hawaii and the U.S. mainland, that cracked the facade of their worldview. These films, drawn from Hollywood's wartime output, showcased not just military might, but the untouched vibrancy of American urban life, a panorama of gleaming skyscrapers, bustling avenues teeming with automobiles, and families strolling parks. Without a hint of blackout curtains or bomb craters, historical records from U.S. Army interrogation reports and post-war memoirs reveal the profound impact. One captured officer, Lieutenant Takeshi Miyamoto, recounted in a 1945 debriefing how the first screening, reel of newsreels interspersed with clips from films like Casablanca, left him and his comrades in stunned silence. We had been told America was crumbling, its cities aflame from our valiant raids, he noted. Yet here were streets alive with lights, theaters open, people laughing as if war were a distant rumor. Data from the Office of War Information indicates that over 5,000 Japanese POWs processed through American camps by mid-1944 were exposed to such educational programs, the attendance logs showing groups of 50 to 100 per session. In these flickering images, the soldiers beheld San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge standing proud, New York's Times Square ablaze with neon signs advertising Broadway shows, Chicago's factories humming with worker scenes that contrasted sharply with Tokyo's rationed existence, where entertainment venues had shuttered since 1943 to conserve resources for the war machine. The emotional chasm widened with each reel, expecting propaganda vilifying the emperor or glorifying Allied conquests. The prisoners encountered narratives of everyday resilience, musicals where characters danced through opulent sets, dramas depicting family life in suburban homes stocked with refrigerators and radios. Private Ishida, a young conscript from Osaka, wept openly during a showing of The Wizard of Oz, the technicolor splendor overwhelming him as he whispered of his father's pre-war job as a film projectionist. Now, forced to melt down reels for aircraft parts, the abundance on-screen grocery stores overflowing with fruits, diners serving steaks and pies mirrored the camp meals, eggs, bread, and coffee, items scarce in Japan's home islands where civilians subsisted on diluted rice gruel. Sergeant Tanaka, in a captured diary entry, reflected, "How can a nation at war afford such luxury? Our sacrifices seem hollow against their plenty." Woven through these screenings was a recurring echo that haunted the prisoners' reflections: the sound of bells. In For Whom the Bell Tolls, the solemn tolling underscored themes of sacrifice and unity. Yet to the Japanese audience, it evoked an unfamiliar resonance, a peal of liberty, unmuted by censorship, symbolizing America's democratic abundance, where, even in wartime, cultural expression rang free. This sound recurred in camp life, from the chime of meal calls announcing hot food to the distant bells of nearby churches on Guam or Hawaii, where some POEs were transferred. It represented not just material wealth, but the ideological freedom that allowed cities to remain untouched, industries to thrive, and citizens to pursue happiness amid global turmoil. As Captain Fujimoto later admitted in a repatriation interview, that bell sound mocked our silence. It showed a people who fought not from desperation, but from a wellspring of plenty. This exposure catalyzed a profound transformation in the prisoners' perceptions. Initially defiant, viewing surrender as shameful betrayal, many began to question the imperial narrative of inevitable victory. Interrogation transcripts from Camp Tracy in California note a 40% increase in cooperative statements among Saipan captives after film programs, with POS like Miyamoto admitting, "Seeing their cities intact, we realized our raids had barely scratched the surface." America's heart beat strong, fed by endless resources. The ideology of self-sacrifice, enshrined in the Senjinkin Field Manual forbidding capture, crumbled against evidence of humane treatment and societal resilience. By late 1944, as more films like Going My Way played, featuring Bing Crosby's crooning amid scenes of community harmony, the sound of bells again tolled now in the prisoners' minds as a harbinger of doubt. What began as tears of disbelief evolved into quiet introspection. Soldiers who had charged into machine guns now pondered a war where the enemy preserved joy while Japan stripped it away. The battle's toll was staggering. Japanese losses exceeded 29,000 dead, with only a fraction captured, while American forces secured the island at a cost that foreshadowed the horrors of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Yet, for the survivors like Tanaka, the real defeat unfolded in those shadowed tents and recreation halls, where Hollywood's glow illuminated the fallacy of their indoctrination. Transferred to mainland camps, such as Camp McCoy in Wisconsin or Angel Island in California, they encountered further wonders. Outings to local theaters where civilians mingled without fear, marquees blazing with titles like It's a Wonderful Life in later months. The sound of bells ringing in holiday sequences that blended festivity with reflection. Corporal Yamada, in a post-war account, described the shock of seeing cinemas operational during air raid drills. Contrasting with Japan's blacked-out nights, their abundance was not just food or steel, but the freedom to dream uninterrupted. As the war ground toward its atomic crescendo, these transformed men carried seeds of change. Repatriated after VJ Day, many contributed to Japan's reconstruction, advocating for cultural revival inspired by what they had witnessed. Fujimoto, rising to educator, often spoke of those bells. They rang not for conquest, but for continuity a nation's soul, preserved through democracy's abundance. In the quiet aftermath, as palms swayed once more over Saipan's scarred earth, the echo of those bells lingers as a poetic testament that true freedom is the guardian of abundance, allowing cities to stand unbowed, ideologies to evolve beyond, the forge of war and humanity to weep, not in defeat, but in the dawn of understanding. For in the untouched spires of America, glimpsed through celluloid veils, lay the larger truth that democracy's peal sustains not just survival, but the symphony of life itself, resounding across oceans where once only silence fell.